From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi, and welcome to Space Brains, the show where we joy-watch sci-fi movies and talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey, and this is Mark.
Hiya, tonight it is episode 75, so we are talking about a classic science fiction film. Classic of them. And this film is, of course, Soylent Green, which came out in 1973, an absolute classic, been referenced to so many times, good and bad, and we're going to delve into the good stuff, sorry. So in tonight's episode, we're going to talk about what we obviously thought of the film, which is going to be all good, the ins and outs of the narrative, and a bit about film language, plus a nice deep dive into a specific piece of science. And I'm hoping that science has something to do with food, because we've never talked about that so far, and I really feel that this film should be about film.
I'm hungry.
Food.
I'm hungry for food.
I'm hungry for food. Definitely want food. Soylent Green was directed by Richard Fleischer, I think. Fleischer. Really big time Hollywood director. Look him up. Made a whole bunch of great films. This screenplay written by Stanley R. Greenberg. That's a real writer's name. Based on the novel by Harry Harrison.
That's the superhero's name, isn't it?
I think so. Yes. Harry Harrison.
So turn back now if you have not seen this movie, because we're going to tell you what Soylent Green is.
We are. Warning.
Did you get that? Still, no? Okay. Anyway, warning. Turn back now. Tune back in. You'll find out what Soylent Green is.
What is Soylent Green? The classic trailer. Go check it out. Wachowski's kind of modelled their Matrix trailer off the old trailer that this film had. I must admit, seeing this for the first time a few years ago, I didn't see it back in 1973 because I wasn't even born. I was really surprised how good this film is, and really want to talk it up tonight with Surrey. It's basically an American dystopian science fiction thriller film. Definitely crosses the genres, and so I want to set that up. We have a detective Thorn. Says everything. He needs to investigate the murder of a wealthy businessman in this dystopian future. This future as well, and I want to get into it a bit later, is one where humanity has just kind of screwed the pooch. Probably where we're heading. And there's overpopulation, there's humidity all the time, there's no food, there's a real struggle just to breathe out in society, and I loved all those details. And
it's set in the year 2022,
which is perfect for us. And in this depleted future, this detective searches for the murderer. He actually reveals a society-wide conspiracy. What was your number one takeaway from Soylent Green, Surrey?
My number one takeaway from Soylent Green is that why don't police officers take more things from crime scenes?
Yeah, I know. It's so great how he does that in that scene, hey?
Or maybe they do.
Yeah, maybe they do.
If you're a police detective and you commonly steal things from crime scenes, keep it to yourself because you'll get in a lot of trouble.
It's a really good little... in this world, makes a lot of sense that he does that, and I like that. It's such an attention. It's like,
it's so cash.
While we're actually, Blake Schneider says the Pope in the pool.
Yes,
right. Like, so a detective story has a lot of Pope in the pool scenes, which means there's a lot of exposition. You got to distract the audience, so it's kind of almost like it's a distraction to the audience of like, what's he going to steal next? And he does. He just keeps stealing shit, which is great.
I mean, sometimes in these detective films, they will distract you with a tense, confrontational interrogation sequence, where there's sweat and there's the bright light and all the rest of it. But that wouldn't have been appropriate in this setting. But having this dude, he's just so casually was just helping himself to everything. He's just like open up things, checking stuff out, takes the bourbon,
nibbling, biting.
He just grabs the pillowcase.
Yeah.
And starts, he puts the towel in, the soap, a bottle of this. And it was just fantastic that he was just so casual about it. Surprised he didn't take the furniture.
Well, he almost did.
He kind of did
he kind
take the furniture, I suppose you might say. But
he took it on the side. He took it out in the kitchen. He took it each way.
Yeah, it's kind of another sort of interesting view in this. But I did love the casual immunity that the police seem to have.
Yeah.
Like, no one wanted to fight him.
No.
And when the guy did try to punch back at him, says, "You'll get life for that." Like, for taking a swing at a cop, you'll get life in prison. So, then only makes sense that you're going to just use that power, aren't you?
Well, yeah, and it's the desperate. I mean, even though there's that power for the cops, they, from what we see, are not treated well. You know what I mean? And it's just another real job. Even at the police station, you notice like the captain, his chair's got holes in it and fabric sticking out, and he's got piles and piles of paperwork and not dressed that well. Like even though they're cops, it's a desperate kind of job. So sure, there's maybe the one perk is that you get to steal stuff at crime scenes.
Turn up to, I mean, well, that guy was so rich.
Yeah.
And he was dead.
Yeah, he's dead.
So I really don't see that anyone cares.
No.
Really. Then moving on to, is this hope, warning, or an experiment?
To me, total warning. So even though this is in 1973, I think we can see a lot of parallels to today in that, like global warming and the sort of effects of that on our society, and that we could head down a path where something like Soylent Green is how our society ends up being. You know, if there's overpopulation, not enough food, not enough, the air quality's poor, the humidity, the heat. They're saying, the heat, it's like the ongoing heat, and it's what we're facing. We just had the hottest West Australian summer ever. 33
the hottest Western Australian summer ever so far.
So far, you're right. Yeah, so 33.3 degrees was the average. We also had more days above 35 than they've ever had on records. And remember, those records are only a couple hundred years old, so there could have been hotter times in the past. But it seems that when you look at temperature, it is slowly going up and up and up. The averages.
We had the wettest July as well.
Yeah, we did. So we're having that extremity of weather, like many places throughout the world. So I sort of see some parallels to that. So I think the fact, this Soylent Green idea, it's not that far removed from where we could head. And even overpopulation, you look at the refugee situation because of something like Russia trying to invade Ukraine, and then also the Germans don't want to fight because they get 55% of their energy from Russia. So if they turned off that gas pipe, Germany would be in a lot of problems. Germany is the economic powerhouse of Europe. So if Germany collapses in terms of the economy, it's going to affect the whole of Europe. So therefore, you're sort of like, we'll take the refugees in. Suddenly you're taking in 2 million displaced Ukrainians into one country at the one time, So overpopulation's a real thing, I mean, in Australia, we can probably handle a huge population increase in one go, but, you see in this example of New York City in 2022, 40 million people, 40 million. They're sleeping on the steps, Surrey. That's what they're dying on the streets out the front of a church with their child with a piece of rope tied to them, so the child kind of lives on or whatever. So it's a warning to me. It's a big warning that humans have always been a bit rotten, but the earth can be beautiful. Yes. I think the other thing is we're heading. There's an interesting science behind heading towards eating, more plant-based materials instead of, meat like cows that take up too much space and stuff. So that's one option. But also the other option recently is, and it's a growing market for Asia, is eating protein from bugs or whatever. And it's actually, there's a company here in Mandurah that's doing that. They're growing that and selling that as protein food to Asian markets, right? And so it's just a way of condensing. When the population gets too big, it's like, how do you feed protein? And so that's what Soylent Green kind of suggests as well. It's like, what's another protein source? What is Soylent Green? Sorry. So What was I know you had not watched Soylent Green before. What was your first impression?
Well, my first impression was that it came across very nostalgic. Again, it's interesting that we did this film 73 after Battle Beyond the Stars, which is 1980.
Yep.
Just 80, I think it was. And in that episode, go back and listen to it, I talk about a particular style of filmmaking. And the Battle Beyond the Stars is kind of the extension, though, of what this was. Science fiction films were like Soylent Green. Back through the 60s, 70s, and even coming to the 80s, Star Wars, and we're going to do that as a classic one day.
Yeah.
It totally rewrote the book on how to use a camera, how you present the universe, and how you film these things. It took what had previously been done and then just kind of amped it up.
Yeah.
The Soylent Green, it felt real in the sense that it still had that very down to earth, gritty feeling of a street cop drama.
Yeah.
It had a 70s aesthetic, but you could easily have just put that same thing just like in a modern setting, with different clothing and hairstyles.
Yeah.
The filming was very kind of what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
The feeling. Yeah. Whereas nowadays, and I think it was, and I'm going to blame Matrix for this, which is, again, we've done Matrix as a classic. And one of the reasons Matrix is a classic is because it was another evolution of filmmaking style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Star Wars is one, Matrix is another. There's 2001. There's a few of these around, which just basically said, threw the rule book out, created a whole sort of new way of, viewing the future, viewing the world and the universe.
And that's the thing. This film is the reason why this is a classic is not so much the filmmaking; it's the storytelling.
The storytelling. It presents a realistic.
Yeah.
Like I could feel that he was walking through New York.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they didn't have funny little hover cars. No. All the cars are busted.
Yeah.
And there were people around. It was grimy, but it wasn't over the top, stylistically grimy. No. Like you look at the movie Dark City, which is it's dark, and it's grim, it's noir. It wasn't. This just looked like this could have been a Clint Eastwood movie.
Yeah, and it could have been New York 1973, right, when they made the film. So it looks like that, and that adds to that dystopian feel. It's just a worn down world.
Yeah, it really sold that dystopia because it looks so realistic. It wasn't stylized. It wasn't cartooned.
Yes, that's right.
That when he's come down his stairs and there's a guy sitting at the top of the stairs with an assault rifle, just sitting there guard.
Yeah, yeah.
And he goes down. He has to hold onto the banister.
Yeah.
And kind of hop over. Scoot 1 foot down here, there, and the little baby cries, and people sort of move and stuff because they're all just huddled because there's a curfew, not out on the street.
Yeah.
So once he gets out on the street, it's just empty.
Yeah.
He's walking in the evening, and it's just empty streets with just broken cars. People have got little chimneys come out of some of the cars. If you noticed,
yeah,
they're living in there.
They're living in there,
and because it had that real feel, it really sold it to me, and I thought, this is a really good view of an overpopulation, but dying life. This is an Earth that is not coping.
No, and that's a good way of probably describing dystopia in this way, isn't it? It's like slowly dying. They're just all slowly dying.
So you've seen this one before.
Yeah.
How's your second viewing compare? Because sometimes with that second view, you pick up extra things. You pay more attention.
So, it is a film that is all about the twist, the thriller side of things. But I found that it held up the second time. I was interested still in the plot. I think it's a really fast-moving plot. It's also quite intriguing, like we said, those moments of him stealing stuff from the crime scene, the relationship he builds with the furniture, Shirl, and even the fact the sort of the plot that's going on behind him, which is very normal for a detective plot. So there's kind of there's moving things going behind his protagonist path. So to try to he's creating ripples for the powers that be, and they're reacting to that and then coming back at him with other ripples, you know. There was really some fascinating things, I thought, with power dynamics, you know, like with Shirl being a piece of furniture, and also then even the bodyguard is a girlfriend, you know, and the fact of like offering themselves as meat, I suppose, in a way,
as a piece of furniture.
Yeah, as a piece of furniture. But even in her case, she sort of wasn't a piece of furniture. She was sort of like a girlfriend of the bodyguard. But then she even said to Charlton Heston, "Oh, I would have offered you something." And he goes, "Oh, well, I would have if I had more time."
Yeah.
So there was this interesting pattern, as you said, like when he fights the bodyguard, as they're fighting, it's like, well, if you hit me, it's life, you know, your life is done because that's the law, you know. So there was a lot of really interesting dynamics. I think I picked up a little bit more. I think I also understood the character of Soul and him being the what they call them, the book.
That's what they call them.
They call them the books.
Yeah.
The books, yeah. And then how he goes to the exchange, and it's kind of like just like a library, and it's like, oh, this is like we would devalue information in this type of society, wouldn't we? You know, people would, because you're just more in survival mode. So it also reminded me a little bit, like many years ago I went to Sierra Leone after Sierra Leone had the war. I was there for a documentary, and this is not to kind of take any offense, but a post-war society was very hobbled together and people just doing what they need to survive. And so, you know, like, for example, white people in their country doing something like filming, we were then taken advantage of, you know, and tried to be scammed. And it wasn't anything violent. It was just money. It was just pure survival of money. They wanted our money, you know.
You've got it, they don't have it. So
you don't. And I mean to the extent of police, like paying police officers. We paid police officers, and it felt, watching this, I think this time that you mentioned Thorn and him stealing stuff, it's kind of like, well, yeah, in a society like post-war, a cop would probably walk into a crime scene, doesn't make him a bad cop, but because of the society, then he's going to, oh yeah, well, this vase might be worth a lot of money. I'll take it home to my wife. We'll try to sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
Yes.
Who are you? Oh, you're the media. Well, yeah, you can take photos, but you got to pay us. And
Yeah.
it's like, that might not necessarily be legal or ethical, but they're just trying to survive. And so I sort of noticed some tangible truths there from my own experience of going to somewhere like that, where everyone was just in survival mode and, you know, looking, how do I survive? How do I keep my family alive? How do I do it? As you said, chimneys in the cars, you know, living on a staircase because that's all you've got, going to the local church because there's nowhere else to shelter, you know, like, that's what happens in those survival times. And to me, I picked up probably a few more of those bits of the details in the second viewing. But I think it still stands up, even though it's a type of film that the twist, what is Soylent Green, comes right at the end of the film. Watching it a second time, it didn't ruin it. Like, I was picking up a lot more bits of the puzzle and more details, I think, than the first time. So I thoroughly enjoyed watching the second time. I'd watch it again. I reckon that to me makes it a classic.
Yeah.
Like, I can feel like I could even watch this film again now and I'd still enjoy it. I'd still pick up bits of it.
the only thing I'd known about this was the Soylent Green is
You
people.
knew the secret.
Yes. Like,
Yeah.
and it's literally the last 3 words said in the whole movie. And I was just, you're kind of wondering how it's going to fit in. And but more like, what is the importance of that secret?
Yeah,
That's what, you know, held me in there. I was like, you know, and on a brief blush, you sort of think it's kind of a bit of an overreaction that they, you know, basically accept their death. You know, Sol and Simonson both like, well, yeah, I can't hold this secret. This is too terrible. And
the priest as well, right?
Yeah, and
Like,
I'm
he
sort
was
of thinking,
crumbling.
you know, it's okay, yeah, it's kind of a bit gross, but when you look at the deeper aspect or the message or the illusion that it's providing as a, you know, it's holding up that mirror to our current society where people in Soylent Green are literally consuming themselves. Like this, it's a society literally consuming itself just to survive so that it can produce more bodies to consume. Like it's that view of our society, our civilization, our way of life as a sausage factory.
Yeah.
Where we just put meat in and squish it out the other end.
Yeah, yeah.
Why do we go to work so that we can pay for our children to get a good education so they can get a good job
And
to be able to pay for their kids' education to get a good,
yeah.
you start getting to that point where you're going, well, hold on. Is there nothing beautiful in the world? Is there nothing worthwhile that is other than that sort of relentless pursuit of profit and growth? And this film sort of points out, okay, well, here's a society whose normal capitalism has failed because, they're no longer producing stuff. It's rare to get fresh food and things, and they've got factories which are fortresses. Not factories like farms, that are fortresses, he says. Yeah. And clearly you can still get things, there's someone's got a couple of apples and a limp stick of celery and a little bit of beef and things. So it's passed beyond that, and now it's literally just the consumers are consuming other consumers. And it's and because cynically that's what we're doing now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do those people go to work at the cafe? Well, to hand coffee to the people who work at the hairdressers next door, and they do that because they got to cut the hair of the people who work at the accountancy down the road who are doing the taxes for the coffee shop.
Yep.
And so it's just goes in this circle.
Yeah. And I think in that same mirror reflection idea you're talking about, also we don't really have a say in then how that actually plays out. That's what this film was saying. The people at the bottom, even Thorn, they're just doing a job. And he's like, I don't want to lose my job. He says it 3 times in the film. I noticed on this viewing. So, he's so desperate. He doesn't want to lose his job because he knows he will slide even worse. His position will go worse.
He'll move from his apartment out onto the stairs.
Out onto the stairs, yeah. And so, but at the same time, it's the same as our society now is that you have the powerful, the wealthy society side that kind of make those decisions. And here the analogy is put to the extremity of we'll sell you this Soylent Green stuff. It's protein-based food. It'll keep you alive. But that's them made that decision. No one is telling them that it's actually eating humans. Maybe we'd be all right eating each other if we were starving to death. But the information is not provided. It's been decided by other people. Yeah. And it's the same with the idea of Shell, being a piece of furniture. It's being decided by those other people in our society. It's not being decided by
whether
us.
she gets to stay there or not. Yeah. Not her choice.
Not her choice, no. Yeah. No. So I think there's that sort of idea of the mirror of we don't really get that decision either as the worker bees in the hive.
And I think this is what makes it sci-fi.
Yeah.
Because we do have this, it's science fiction, sociological science fiction more than anything else. There's not really any technology presented here which is not existent or wasn't feasible in 73. I suppose you could easily just create those Soylent biscuits.
Yeah.
Everything, those dump trucks were just 1970s.
Yeah.
The whole lot.
Guns, all that were just standard stuff.
And even the cars, they didn't even bother doing the cars up. No. And that wasn't the point. The point is they took the society to the extreme. And they took these ideas. And that's why I think this is a classic, because at the time, if you were in 1973 and you watched this film, you kind of would have gone, I can see it didn't do that well with the critics. I mean, it cost $4 million and returned 210 global or something. So it's been a very significantly successful film. But the critics at the time were sort of going, it's sort of just like a New York cop show with some fancy dress on it. Yeah. It's not. It's kind of a little bit ordinary.
Yeah.
But maybe you need a bit of distance from that. You can look at it and go, actually, that's quite a prescient film. It's really presented. Here we are, 2022. Metaphorically, we're doing some of the things in this movie.
Definitely. So that looking at the philosophy of society, sci-fi in here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do we have any science fiction action going on that we're doing?
Well, we do have our film festival coming up. So the Spacebrains Science Fiction Film Festival happening here in Mandurah. More than welcome to come. The borders are opening as of tomorrow. By the time you listen to this podcast, the borders in WA are open again.
My parents will be coming.
They're going to
only a week after this is out. My parents will arrive and see their grandkids for the first time in years.
Our capitalist leader here is giving you free rat tests as you arrive, so you'll be safe and sound.
Soylent Yellow, Soylent Red,
Soylent Rat, and whatever it is.
Rat.
And I think there's free tourism vouchers. I wonder if your parents will pick them up. That was what was announced today. There's some freebies in there. Anything worth $100 to $2,000 freebies that they're handing out. So more than welcome to WA and come to the festival.
Tickets are going to be on sale. Sure, I'm just wondering if they're going to be on sale by the time this is out. Maybe. So imminently. So check the Manpack site.
And our site.
Subscribe to Manpack. You get the newsletter, and we'll be in that, I'm sure. You'll be able to get the tickets. There's workshops. There's the screening and awards, or you can do the whole lot.
Yep.
It's going to be a fantastic day. We're securing some lovely speakers to come and talk to us about useful things.
Certainly are.
Science fiction oriented, obviously.
Yeah. So hopefully to have some filmmakers, some expert science, some writers, podcasters, sort of all under the one roof, delivering some tailored workshops. And then, as Surrey mentioned, followed by an awesome couple of hour red carpet screening event with all the best short sci-fi that has been submitted to Spacebrains.
And I have a sneaky suspicion there will be an after party.
Probably.
But whether that's...
Kombuchas all round.
Yeah, how heavily advertised that will be, or if it may be a secret, invite-only arrangement for the filmmakers and so on. We'll see. We'll see how that turns out.
And there will be Soylent Green catering available. We've lined up that company, so apparently it's really good stuff. Nice, cheap protein.
Plankton-based.
Plankton-based. That's right, take in the vegans, I think. Plankton is vegans? Yeah, no. Maybe.
Depends on how far you take your veganism, I suspect.
Yeah, probably. Like everything. So let's get stuck into the plot and some of the details of Soylent Green. So this film did come out in 1973. We mentioned before Richard Fleischer. Not sure.
He has made, I'd recognise the name.
Yeah.
I looked him up. He has made some of my favourite 80s and earlier films.
Any one that sticks out?
Conan the Destroyer, Red Sonja.
Conan the Destroyer, yeah.
Yeah.
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Tora.
Tora.
Yeah, and I think he made an Empty Mill film in there, a horror film as well, in the 80s.
Amityville 2?
Yeah, something
sequel?
like that.
Yeah.
But he's very prolific, made a whole bunch of
he's made
different...
Westerns, he's made a Viking films. Epic.
Yep.
Yeah, he's made, science fiction films, including, he did like the Omega Man. And,
yeah. That's another one.
Was he Logan's Run?
Maybe.
Or did I just listen?
That's a fact check. Someone out there could fact check. Sorry.
I did actually confuse Logan's Run with Soylent Green.
Yeah.
And I thought that people over the age of 30 got turned into Soylent Green.
Right.
Which, that's kind of cool too.
Yeah. We'll have to come back to that. Don't give away any spoilers, sorry. And it was written by Stanley Greenberg, based on the novel by that superhero Harry Harrison. Now, the one and only Charlton Heston. You might like him, you might not like him, but he is a tour de force as an actor, and he stands out in this film as Thorn.
100 feature films in 60 years.
Yeah, and also the lead representative of the NRA.
For a while there. He was also a equal rights campaigner.
Yep.
So he was very much for ending segregation and black rights and women's rights.
Yeah.
Then he jumped onto. He left the Democrats, joined the Republicans, supported Reagan, and got the whole NRA thing. Yeah. 98 to 2003.
Yeah.
But then he was diagnosed, sadly, with Alzheimer's. So he had to step aside from that, and he has since passed on. He was in a number of science fiction films.
Yeah.
Another classic, The Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes, yeah.
And he was in
we will have
so
to
many.
look at that
There's
one.
100 films he's been in.
Yeah.
A number of science fiction films as well. But Planet of the Apes is another one that you'd definitely, that's pretty much where he gets his whole NRA credibility from. From my dead, where's his cold dead hands?
From my cold dead hands. Yeah. And Leigh Taylor-Young as Shirl. And the other one I want to mention is Edward G. Robinson. He's been in loads of films. He plays Soul in this film. And him and Charlton just have some sort of chemistry going on, don't they? And
he was going to be in Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, right.
He did the makeup test for Dr. Zaius.
Okay.
But
Dr.
the heavy makeup and the long filming combined with his heart it wasn't going to look good. So they went, nah.
He's just like, you see it in this film. I mean, you see it with Charlton as well, but like they're kind of actors that I do wonder if you really looked into them, if they had a lot of theatre in their background, but they're just actors that know how to live in a scene. And I think that's the thing, when Charlton steals all the stuff, he's like really living in that scene.
Yeah.
Like he's very casual and he leans on stuff, and the way he holds, like what I mean is they're kind of like actors that know how to hold their body where they look like they belong in that scene. And these two, it was interesting. There's that nice scene in the second act where they actually eat that food that he's stolen.
Oh.
And it's like almost like a romantic scene in a way.
It's wonderful
Like they really enjoy this food, and we'll come to it in a moment. But that was actually an ad lib scene from the director that they just he wanted them to play it out, and you see that like they looks like it should belong in the movie. So the director had the vision there to put that in, but they didn't have a script to run with. They were just ad-libbing that, and that's a great little scene. They really interacted and worked through it the way they ate that food, you know?
It was a it was a standout scene, like the whole sequence. In fact, every sequence where you had Charlie and Eddie. We're old mates.
Australians.
Eddie and Charlie.
And Eddie.
Yeah, of course, Charlton Heston's... It's not his original name.
No.
He was John Carter.
John Carter.
Which is oddly... odd because there was a movie, John Carter.
Science fiction about John Carter, yeah.
Didn't have... Which he would have done well in, actually.
He would have, in his day.
But old Charlie and Eddie, every scene they had together, you really got that feeling they were close, because they were supposed to be very close.
They were supposed to.
Yeah, they even said, that they loved each other, which was like a very refreshing sort of honesty and emotional vulnerability between these two people, and it sounded very genuine.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they were really very fond, like maybe brothers, maybe father-son sort of dynamic, swapping between those two.
Yes,
but definitely a family dynamic because of the way it is. It was very good.
Now we do need a little fact check here, because you mentioned some different numbers for the budget and the box office, and what I got. What I've got is 2 million was the budget, and the box office is doubling that to 3.7 million. Again, remembering this is 1973, so those numbers do add up to be a lot more money. I think it cost like $1 to go to the movies back in those days.
Mine was global take so far.
Okay.
$200 million it's done around the world so far.
And maybe that also means since 1973, over time.
It's not that, because the box office figure is usually for the first week.
No, the box office on IMDb tends to be that total of the cinematic release.
Oh, its original release, yeah. So it's since gone on to international release.
Yeah.
DVDs, CDs,
right. That would make more sense,
Blu-ray, the whole lot.
Yeah, and it is something that people have talked about. I knew even when I went to film school, people kind of joked about Soylent Green, or as mentioned in the textbooks, and I never got around to watching it myself at that age. I should have, but I just never did. So, yeah, you're never too old to watch this film, and you're never too young. So go check it out. So we like to, on Space Brains, break the narrative down into some common elements that you can find from all good story and script writing teachers. Some of this goes right back in time to, Shakespearean times or whatever.
I reckon it goes back to biblical.
Probably does. Joseph Campbell, Hero's Journey, total classic when it comes to writing stories. Go check it out. Myths and all that, legends stuff comes under Campbell, really. And there's some other guys in there. I mentioned Blake Schneider a lot. It's a real Hollywood guy. Robert McKee, again, really based in the sort of United States narrative, and Field as well, more into how to sell a good story. But the essential side of all of this, Surrey, is a 3-act structure. So a beginning, middle, end. Sounds so easy, but when you sit down to write at the keyboard, not so easy sometimes. Oh. So we need to break that down into those acts. So what happens in Act 1? In
Act 1 is where you think you're really confident, you know exactly what you're writing.
That's right. You can blitz 10 pages like that.
You go, wow, this is the best Act 1. And then you realise, in fact, that you've forgotten everything. Yeah. Now, Act 1 is the introduction. It's the setup. It's the part where we have an opening image like this. Because it's a visual media we're talking here, but this basically still works for written work or
it would
audio.
Work for a novel as well.
It has slightly different timings involved, but the opening image is usually literally some images which set a scene and tell you what the world is going to be like.
Yeah.
We meet the characters And we get some, sometimes the theme is very directly stated. Like you'll have a character sort of say, bravery is just about admitting you're afraid, but doing it anyway, or something like that.
That's a good one.
And
Take notes.
And it'll come up later on. So the theme gets stated. We then have all the characters. We have the catalyst or the inciting incident. This is the part where you as an audience member are presented with, I like to think of it as you're presented with a question and the answer is in Act 2 or 3 or, across both of those.
Yeah, definitely.
But in any case, you've got this question and now you want to know how it is answered, how it unfolds.
Yeah.
And there's always a bit of umming and ahhing, the debate, before we get to Act 2. Because we get given a question, something dramatic happens, the main character involved is like, this, I wasn't expecting this. What, should I do something about this? And obviously, yes. But it's always, and this debate, I think it sets us, as the audience, sets us up to start questioning and thinking about these things. And it gets our juices flowing into the story.
Yeah.
Which goes to Act 2.
Yeah. And part of that debate could be that them not being brave. So that repeats the theme, doesn't it?
Yes.
So Act 2 is the fun and games. We like to have fun in movies. We like to actually have the play out of the scenes and the story that they've decided to go on. So in Soylent Green, it's a murder mystery. That's the inciting incident. Now in Fun and Games, it's a detective investigating the murder mystery. So that's the fun and games.
You got to have a chase. You got to
have like maybe a car chase or a foot race. You got to have some fighting. You got to find some more interesting characters that are going to reveal little bits and bobs of the murder, and also set up some sort of this person could be the murderer or this person could be the murderer. So like that's the whole point. So we need to set that up, and that's the Fun and Games. It's where we as the audience sit down and go, oh yeah, baby, this is a good story. And sometimes it's something that leads to a bit of a positive midpoint or a more negative midpoint. So in a murder mystery, it could be that, oh, no, it's not just one person that's dead. It's a whole bunch of people. We've got a serial killer on our hands.
And another common midpoint for cop movies or stories is now the detective is suspected.
That's right. So he's maybe kicked off the force.
They're thrown off the case
exactly.
Because they thought they'd busted the bad guy, but it was actually, they'd accused the mayor.
Yeah, that's right.
And the mayor was found to be innocent.
Yes.
Or was he? But no, it doesn't matter because now the cop is out on his ass.
Yeah, or even the cop could be, it is the mayor, but I don't have the bravery to arrest the mayor. And then the sergeant's like, well, you're not brave enough to be a cop. Get out of here, so you've made a mistake, so get off the force, So definitely, and quite often there is that midpoint is more of a downer, which heads us into more negative territory or up in the stakes. And some of this stuff in the storyline is to really build that tension. So things get worse for our protagonist. The world closes in. In a murder mystery like this, we have, the mayor was innocent. So the cop's thrown off the force. He no longer has the weight of the law behind him. And yet now he's closer to the killer, but he's got no gun. And so the killer has something back over him, And then it turns out that the mayor actually is the plot, the leader of building these murders up or whatever, right? It all comes out to play. Then heading to the third act, sorry.
The third act is, of course, the finale. This is how everything is wrapped up. We end up with, coming out of Act 2, the hero has been inspired to take that final last hard push. Even though he's been discouraged and in trouble, now he's gone, I'm going to push through, and he jumps and does what he has to do. But then it's not quite enough because he's just been carrying on the way he's always been carrying on.
Yeah.
And he gets, there's a reversal of some sort, and his true mettle is tested. The theme of the movie might be required to play out now.
Definitely.
And through that, the hero rises and we get a finale. Or if we have an anti-hero story where the hero decides to, or the anti-hero decides that he can do better than himself or beat himself.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a confusing thing with anti-heroes. Go talk to Batman, find out what he's all about.
Yeah.
And we get the final image, which is sort of the opposite, or it's a bookend, or it's some sort of exclamation point on the opening image. So we'll see something that'll indicate how things are going to be afterwards.
Yeah.
And that's
After this journey.
And that's usually the point that sticks with you.
Yes.
When you leave. So a well-crafted movie like Soylent Green is people sticks to you. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd never seen the movie, but I knew that phrase.
Knew what was coming.
So many places. You know, The Simpsons have done it, of course. Futurama, of course. Countless other movies and things have somehow referenced that phrase or that concept.
What a twist.
What a twist.
So we'll get into the plot. I just want to set up the dynamics of the story about that. And we've talked a bit about this already. The world is overcrowded. The people are dirty, grimy, living on the streets, in the cars, in the staircase. Things are broken. The chairs are broken. When he comes up and down that staircase, it's like the baluster is shaking like anything. He's standing on people's fingers, but at the same time kind of maneuvering like he does this all the time. There's guys sitting at the bottom or the top of staircases with machine guns, and that's just normal. That's the security. The furniture is women that obviously have no other value, and it's a really good way for them to survive. So just basically come with the apartment is a woman, right? So that's interesting, sort of dynamic to this dystopian world that they build. Also, every time the characters kind of make a decision, it's quite a desperate decision. So, like we're saying, he steals stuff from the apartment. The concierge, when he comes in, he starts beating up those women for being in the apartment.
He fully punches one of them in the guts.
Yeah, he punches them in the guts. He slaps someone
sorry, that's not great. It's terrible.
No, it's terrible.
But it's great to see a character being portrayed.
That's right. And as I said before, the bodyguard's wife offers herself as well to try to keep things on the down and arrow with Thorn. The riot, it's like people are just on the edge, they're only giving us a quarter pound of Soylent Green today. And everyone's like, no, there better be more stuff. And then it's like, get the riot, the scoop thing.
The scoops, yeah, I love that.
We're getting the scoops, they're not just move out of the way, riot patrol. It's like, no, it's like this society is really on a knife's edge, constantly, and everyone's life is on a knife's edge. So I just want to sort of set that up. Violence seems to be at every turn is the decision is let's go to violence. If you go to the church scene, people are spewed all over the place. The priest is exhausted and he doesn't even seem to have his mind with him, trying to, just be a priest. He can't. So yeah, I think that's important. That tone is set from the start of this film and it goes all the way to the end. So Surrey was mentioning the opening image. This film does an interesting opening montage, right? It does a series of photos. It goes for a couple of minutes, and the photos kind of demonstrate the industrial age of humanity up until the year 2022. And what I loved about this montage is it kind of it starts with some of those, the beginning of the industrial age and stuff, is people are quite happy in the photos, but society seems to be quite good. The music is quite upbeat and happy at that point. When we get to about the middle, when we're getting more to the 1960s, kind of there's freeways and cars and stuff like that, the music starts getting faster and faster, we're building up to a climax. Busier. And things are busier. There's lots more people. The population is growing, the technology is growing, the cars are growing. And the music really upbeats to that. And then people are also not starting to look so happy. And I think there's images, starts to put in images of pollution and maybe war and stuff. And then it kind of, from there, descends further into, real pollution in the environment, destruction of lands. And the music really then doesn't increase in speed. It then becomes quite a depressing tonal orchestra score from the original beat. And I'm like, wow, in about 2 minutes, the director there has really shown us society and where we've gone wrong.
It's brought us up to speed.
Yeah, it's brought us up to speed. And so that's a great, to me, opening image. Did you feel like that?
Yeah, I liked that it was in there. There was no voiceover.
No voiceover.
You know how much I hate the text scrolls and the voiceovers,
And that's the thing, right? Like we see a lot of, especially sci-fi, we do see a lot where you have that opening text, the year 2022.
Yes.
New York is overpopulated. Global warming has devastated the environment.
Yeah.
Like when you look at this was a really clever visual way of showing us the breakdown of society.
We've got a movie. We're seeing footage. Show us
footage.
I don't want to read. Becoming overpopulated.
I didn't come here to read, nerd.
Yeah, I would have read the book. There's a book.
There's a book.
They wrote a book about this movie?
Yeah, that's right. And we open then with Detective Thorn and this old man, the police recorder, the book. And they're in this little dirty apartment. They're really desperate for food. Thorn says in this opening bit that he's not going to give away his job.
There's 20 million unemployed people.
20 million unemployed people, yeah.
So 50% unemployment.
50% unemployment, yeah. And he hops on the bike, little soul, to get a little bit of power going.
Charge up the batteries.
And he says something like, I've ridden around the world 3 times.
Yes.
Just to charge the batteries. When Thorn exits, there's overcrowded stuff. There's people spewed all over the place, down the stairs. It's not a very pleasant looking place to begin with.
And I mean, he's still looking into some old 2-year-old murders and things, but people are moved, can't be found.
Yeah.
Or, whatever else. He can't get a break on any of these things. Crimes that are going unsolved, and there's so many unemployed people, and he says that I think later on in the movie he even mentions if he's 2 days off sick, then his job gets passed on to someone else.
That's right, yeah.
Which, that's kind of a bit rough.
So we cut then to, there's this guy on the street, hops into the car with, is it his wife or something? Or his wife was in the back seat living, I think, doing something, or a woman's in the back, and this sort of guy with sunglasses and a weird hat kind of, and it's great because he pulls out 2 bits of metal and clips them together, and it's this big hook, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
kind of like a crowbar
thing.
But I think later Thorn says a meat hook. And I'm like, oh, maybe that a meat hook?
I would have thought it was just a Jimmy bar, but pry bar or something.
Anyway, but it's a pretty, and this guy really rubs it, gives it a good once over. We then cut to the introduction of Soylent Green Day is on Tuesday. Soylent Green. Whoa.
Silent red, Soylent yellow, Soylent
yellow.
Yeah, there's high carbohydrate, and there's now Soylent Green, high in protein.
Yeah.
So that was the good one.
Yeah, and they explain it's some sort of substitute from sea plankton, but don't really give us any other description of that, which is, I thought it's good. You don't need to over-explain it.
Well, it's funny, though, because this whole movie is called Soylent Green.
Yeah.
And the original trailer is, what is the secret of Soylent Green? But the movie really downplays the whole Soylent Green thing. It's mentioned in the background, but so is Soylent Red and Soylent Yellow. Yeah. So is, the fact that the world is overpopulated, whatever,
Yes. Yeah. But I think Soylent Green is the what the exposed twist of the film is.
Yes.
I think red and yellow might actually be other stuff.
Yeah, the lower quality.
Yeah.
Dross.
So we then come into this beautiful young woman who's playing Space Invaders.
Yeah, asteroids or something. Yeah.
Futuristic 2022 video game. It's a pretty cool console, but isn't it?
The funny thing is, in 73, that asteroids would have been cutting edge, but
that was majorly cutting edge.
But they had this feeling in 73 it would be difficult for them to have conceived of what the video games would be like now.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to pre-internet.
I don't doubt in 50 years' time, people are going to look back at the way we have our VR headsets and go, "What? Okay, that's a bit clunky and old."
I just click a button and it's inside my head.
Yeah.
Anyway, so. She plays with this older man, says, "Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed the present." There's this other younger man who's kind of like a bodyguard kind of character, is there, and he escorts her out. She, very sexually suggestive, says, "I'm bringing you back a present." And he doesn't really, and his name is Simonson.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem too excited from the present that she's going to bring back, which I was a bit like, oh, okay. So there's sort of a bit of underground or a bit of underneath tension going on between it all.
I could tell that Simonson was trying to get these people out.
Yeah.
So for what reason?
We cut back. The rough guy is like bashing in the wall, which with the crowbar enables him to climb up. He kind of dodges security, enters this more wealthy area of the town,
space, yeah.
and he heads up the apartment building really quickly, and there he is on top of Simonson, basically. And
the great thing here, as part of the world building, is this guy Gilbert. I think his name was Gilbert.
Gilbert.
He was really simple.
Yeah.
Like he says, I was told that you had to die because you're not reliable.
Yeah.
And the person says, yes. I'm not surprised. I don't like it, but suppose it's necessary.
Mm.
And Donovan Gilbert says, so I'm not doing bad? He's not hamming up like an idiot, but like you can see that he's clearly dealing in concepts that are beyond him. He's just going to get paid.
Yeah. And he does say today, he goes, well, no, Simonson says it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
For God, but it's like the right thing to do, and he's kind of surrendering to it. And he then just hacks into the back of his head, gives him a good few whacks with the crowbar. Nicely shot that. So that to me is the catalyst, right? Is that the catalyst for you?
Yeah, that's certainly the turning point of the story, because we have been told about he's got other murders that are unsolved.
Yeah.
And then we see this murder happen and he's the one who turns up.
Yes.
Which, it invariably makes you think, well, okay, we're going to find out who killed him and why.
That's right, yeah. So the murder. So, and it's one of those ones, see, there's different styles here of filmmaking that do you show the audience, what do you show the audience? So in this context, we have actually seen Gilbert kill Simonson.
Yes.
So we're on the journey with Thorn. We actually know who the murderer is.
Yes.
Which straight away gives you a bit of a clue that there's probably a bigger picture to paint, because
who did the killing is not the important thing.
That's right. So it's not as important. Whereas in another film, we might open, there's some really classic detective films which are well referenced out there, where like Sunset Boulevard, I'm pretty sure by the top of my head, is that classic one that gets referenced, where the start of the film just slowly pans out of this pool and there's a dead woman in this pool, and then the detectives rock up, and so you don't know who murdered her. That's the whole point. So the audience knows as much as the detective. In this one, no, we know more than Thorn. So Detective Thorn investigates a murder, right? But we know he's kind of a depressed, downtrodden police officer or detective in this dystopian world who hasn't maybe solved a case for a couple of years because there's just too many. So he rocks up at the apartment. He doesn't care, really. He wanders around, sniffs the place, starts nibbling, starts stealing things. You mentioned tips out the pillow, starts loading up the pillow.
I love the way he didn't take necessarily obvious valuable things like cash, jewellery. He took a bar of soap, a towel.
Books.
A couple of books that look nice, and some alcohol.
Yeah. And I mean, the bodyguard says, I don't think you should be just taking or having a drink, I think. He goes, because he says, well, get me a bottle of alcohol. And he goes, well, you're not going to work here anymore.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I've been paid for the month. He goes, well, you're retired, you're not working here anymore. Take your money and run.
Who's going to complain?
Who's going to complain? Yeah, and he washes the water off his face, uses running water, and that's a good thing. This Wagner guy rocks up as well, these two black masked men, and they take the body, and they're, Thorn signs, and he's like, oh, you get my normal cut? Yeah, I'll get a cut, and they're taking the body. I don't know what that means. They're going to dispose of the body.
And it's just sanitation. I said sanitation.
Yeah.
And indeed, later on, you find out they literally just chuck them in garbage trucks.
Chuck everyone in garbage trucks. Which, on a side note, in New York, when COVID happened, well, that's actually what they kind of did as well. So, yeah, when there's this much population, how do you deal with that much death? Probably garbage trucks.
Silence. That's a horrifying...
It's a horrifying thing, but it's the...
Horrifying thought, yes.
Yeah. But anyway, he also brings in this piece of furniture, Shirl, the girl, and so that's what I was talking about before. He's acting he starts grilling her pretty normal detective questions, but he's leaning against the aircon, sucking in the aircon as much as he can. She says she wouldn't kill him because it'd be risking her job. So it sort of explains that, oh, I'm not the murderer because this is my job.
It put her out of house and home, wouldn't it?
She comes with the apartment. A new owner can come in and just not take her, and then she's out on the street. Yeah, and then it's an interesting little note here that when Thorn leaves, Cheryl with the guard goes, where are they taking the body? And he's like, oh, it doesn't really matter, does it? Like, they take the body away. And she goes, oh, I seem to have a memory of my grandmother dying and we had a ceremony.
Yeah.
And there's no, oh, well, we don't do that anymore. But the silence from the other character suggests, yeah, that's not our traditions anymore.
So,
we just,
okay.
Then, like, well, fine, but we don't do that.
Yeah, and this is the end of basically the end of Act 2.
Yeah, Act 1.
Sorry, yes. We're about to get to Act 2.
Yeah.
And we're going to enter into B-story territory. But we have this debate. Did you pick up any particular debate? Because some movies or some stories have very obvious ones where they go, oh, I've discovered this thing. I should follow it up. But, oh, no, I'm too scared to. No, I should, for once, be brave in my life.
Yeah.
But in this one, what did you pick up as the debate?
Well, to me, it was Thorn deciding that this isn't just a regular murder. So that, to me, is the debate. So the debate is kind of him going, oh, this needs to be investigated. And to me, that's why actually just before Act 2 is basically him. He meets the captain. So we haven't met the captain before, the chief or whatever. And again, it's in a police station, run down, overcrowded, chairs breaking, bits of furniture. There's bribery happening, survival. The chief is almost like, who cares? We have, I think, doesn't he say something like we have 184 murders today? Something like, so like, who cares about this one? But Thorn makes the argument that, no, this is like an assassination. I think he says something along those lines. So the debate is the Detective Thorn deciding, no, this isn't just a normal murder case. This is a bigger picture.
It made it look like someone just killing, but he knows nothing was stolen because there's still all the good stuff there for him to take.
Yeah. And they joke about that, don't they?
Yeah, who would have taken the chief says, well, how much you take? Everything I get my hands on.
That's right. Everything I can fit in a pillowcase. But it's great, isn't it? Because during him investigating the murder scene, he really comes along so nonchalantly about it all. Like I don't care, I'm stealing stuff. Like, it's very, like, as an audience, it's a bit awkward. It's not like the detective coming in, he's going to solve it, he's looking for every piece of it. It's all very subtle what he's figuring out in the scene, isn't it? Yeah. And that's what I really liked about it. And Heston did that really well. It's a very subtle performance.
And I think the decision to continue on is when the chief says you should get a new book. And he says, no, I can't leave Sol.
Yes. Yeah.
And then he's like, we're doing all right.
Yeah.
And so he goes, I'm going to continue on. Like, there was a bit of pressure there to, let's not get too carried away with this. Get a new book. And
do you think that's the B story, is Sol?
Well, I was going to ask about the B story because there's his relationship with Cheryl, which kind of. But I think it is Sol.
I think it is Sol
because Sol comes up later on at the end of Act 2, which is usually where the B story has a bit of resolution just before Act 3. B story usually doesn't have any play in Act 3.
And if you remember, we didn't focus on it much at the start. They almost have a bit of an argument at the start of the film in that first scene, whereas then now when he comes back with the goodies in the fun and games, he celebrates. And they, as I said, they have this dinner. They have this like almost romantic moment, but it's not romantic as in lustful love, that it's romantic as in just the way they fold out the scene and they just have sheer joy, like little kids having a dinner party.
Because Sol had also introduced the theme of people have always been shitty.
Yes.
But the earth used to be beautiful.
Yeah.
And Thorn not that convinced.
Yeah.
He gets a glimpse of it with his dinner. It's not until the end of Act 2 where the B story wraps up and he goes, yes, that's right. These things used to be beautiful. And Sol had asked at this point, what have we come to? Which was used in the trailer to make it seem as if that was his response to learning about Soylent Green.
Yeah.
But he actually says that in response to seeing the beef, where he's like so overjoyed at seeing fresh meat that he's realised, oh my goodness, how far have we fallen that seeing fresh food is so joyous.
So we jump into the fun and games. Thorn follows the bodyguard. That's his kind of first angle. You know, this is what I mean. So he's a detective.
There must have been a guy on the inside.
The bodyguard's a sophisticated, soldier, so to speak. Let's check him out. And so he sees him exit his home. He enters really roughly. There's a woman. This woman was eating jam out of a jar, and I guess like in terms of her wealth status that didn't make sense, so she hides the jam jar when Thorn comes in. Again, I love Thorn comes in, just starts like opening drawers, pulling out stuff, looking at stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't ask or show a warrant.
No, it doesn't do anything.
Going.
And she's kind of naked, maybe, like she's just wearing like a shawl thing. And she notices that she left her spoon out. So there's a good little like herring, isn't there, in the scene?
Yeah.
While he sort of interrogates her. This time it's much more intentional than the murder scene. He's much more traditional detective. You can see he's asking a series of questions. And then at the end there's a great moment that she says, "Oh, I should have offered you something." And he goes, "Well, if I had the time, I would have taken it." And then leaves, and then she looks down and the spoon's gone.
Spoon's gone.
So it's like, son of a bitch.
So there is a clue that's like, because we don't really know what this clue is. Like,
no, we don't.
I had the hint that, okay, it must be Rich, but then did he take it just because he wanted to take now, something?
What would we expect now? Sorry, it would be for DNA or something, right?
Yeah.
But again, this is 73, way before DNA technology.
And he gave it to Sol, and Sol tasted it. And said strawberries. 150 Ds a jar.
Yeah. And that just says enough to Thorn, so, he takes off. But just before that, that's when they'd had that scene of eating their spoils, like two little children. So beautiful. I love how Sol also right at the end, like, tries to bite the apple, but obviously because you don't eat that food, your teeth wouldn't work really very well anymore, would you? Your jaws would be weak.
He ends up having to chop it up.
But he still enjoys it.
And old Heston, Thorn, down to the very little stem.
Yeah.
He just doesn't waste any of it.
No. It reminded me if you put R2 boys in a room and gave them a dinner party, I think that's kind of how they would eat, kind of thing, like just sort of overjoyed with it all. They either eat that way or
don't touch it.
Don't touch it, at all. So Sol also explains... Oh, yeah, here just before that thing, he also explained from those... He gives him those lovely books.
The Soylent Oceanographic Survey, Volumes 1 and 2.
Yeah. Is it 2015 through to 2019, something like that? Yeah. And he explains to Thorn that Soylent, this company, have actually bought out this other company, and then they actually own half the food supply for the whole world.
Yeah.
Something like that, So it's just like a bit
like
of...
Procter & Gamble or something.
Yeah. Yeah, what's that other one that sort of owns all the...
Monsanto.
Yeah, Monsanto.
So he's going to do a bit of digging into Simonson.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, Thorn is heading back to the West Gate Towers, or the towers, the rich people's tower.
Yeah,
and
Simon's apartment.
He walks in and there's like just... You call it maybe a furniture shop full of furniture. It's just anyway, there's like
the furniture is spectacular.
All the women were up having a bit of a shindig in this apartment.
Yeah.
It's probably what they do when there's, a vacant apartment.
Well, the guy's died. Why not? Take it on.
They all just rock up there.
Enjoying the spoils, right?
And again, Thorn wanders in and doesn't pay much attention. He goes straight to Cheryl, starts talking. And I love this scene also, the casualness with which they just go into the other room and get naked and get into bed.
Yeah.
While he's just questioning it.
Talking,
totally, nothing romantic, nothing sexy at all about this. It's just, okay. And then she just gets off and then he gets it. And it's wonderful.
But here is where there's, because I think you could read into that then Thorn is a bad guy a bit, right? Like he's taken advantage of, even though she's furniture, is he just totally taken advantage? But then I think then the following scene has been deliberately constructed to kind of put him on the good side, right? Save the cat a bit.
Yeah.
So, because then whilst he's in the bedroom with Cheryl, the concierge breaks in.
Charles.
And
that's his only name.
Yeah, that's his one and only name.
Illegal?
That's legal. Yeah. And he just, as we mentioned before, he goes in, he punches one in the guts. He really gives another one a couple of slaps over the face. These women are hysterical. He's obviously got the power over them, and he's questioning how dare they be in this apartment. They should be in their own apartments. And then what I like here is Thorn came back in, and instead of it being like physically violent, he overpowers him with words.
Yeah.
And that was so it showed Thorn was actually quite a good guy, because he's obviously standing up for women, makes a guy a good guy.
Yeah.
So he's saving the women.
I guess.
Yeah, no, it does. It's clear rules of movie play, right? Like, he's saving the cat. This other guy beats and bashes women. Pretty easy to be the good guy, right? But he doesn't come in and just start beating him up, which he probably could have, because the guy was a lot littler than him.
And isn't allowed to fight police.
No, he isn't allowed to fight police. But they overpower through the use of words and the sort of power play of being a police officer, and what's he doing there, and does he want to make a report, and maybe these women want to make a report.
I asked all these women in here to question them.
Yeah.
Do you have a problem with that?
Yeah,
like, oh, well, no, of course not. Yes.
Maybe you'd like to make a report. And while he's doing that, he's clicking his gun in.
Yeah.
So it's threats of violence and power over how much power you have. Because I think, again, both these guys have power, but they don't actually have a lot of power. They're still not like the wealth, right? They're not the wealthy people.
No, well, you see the difference in where they're living and what Simonson has, on call.
Yeah. So to me, and then he leaves, the women leave, and Thorne's going to leave. And to me, this is the midpoint, sorry. So it'd be interesting what you think. But I've found that this was...
he stays the night in the police apartment.
There's kind of like a false victory here, because he's going to go off. Cheryl offers him to stay, food. She's going to rub him down after a shower. Yeah. And they have this kind of like... they have the shower, and it's kind of almost a bit kind of comedy, or I think it's laughing at the weirdness it is for someone that lives normally in those other apartments, and then now they're in this luxury scenario, and they sort of joke about it, and they go, we'll make it so cold it's like winter.
Well, and that is why this is a midpoint, because it's almost like a victory. It's like he's kind of
he's enjoying
got
these
this
spoils.
high point.
Yeah.
And this is going to be the highest he gets. But there's a lovely line in there where he grabs a cigarette off the woman, and he takes a puff and hands it back to her and goes, if it wasn't for the money, I'd probably have 2 or 3 of those in a day. Like, was that a joke about addiction in 1973?
I think so.
Where people like pack a day at least.
Yeah, yeah.
Easy done.
Yes.
I think that I actually had a bit of a chuckle at that.
I thought that was a cool line
but
too.
But it was definitely an indicator that we've hit that middle point region where he's now on top of the world. He's making progress. He's got a suspect. He's staying in the luxury apartment. And then we start going down. And I think we see that symbolized, but he goes to the church, because Cheryl told him to the church. Yeah. He goes to the church and he unties a little child from the mother's, was tied to
dead
the
hands
wrist.
from my cold dead hands.
Yeah, from her cold dead hands. It takes this sobbing child into the temple, the church, where the priest then is zombie-like, and this clearly, as the audience, you're going, is it just exhaustion, or does he also know something? Because Simonson was ready to die, and now this guy is not looking great, and
he almost coughs up something that priests aren't allowed to do, which is confession and reveal confession, especially back in 1973. And you're exactly right. It's like he's got a secret he wants to give out. But again, I love the world building here, because the church is overcrowded. There's bunk beds. He says, we should really have a mass. Should I move things for a mass? Like he's questioning Thorn and asking for that reference point, which clearly he is just distraught and overwhelmed with everything, and what should he say and shouldn't say. And it's a great scene, that one. And to me, it is bad guys closing in. This world is shitty.
Because it's straight after that where Thorn goes in to talk to the chief again. And I made a note, the chief here is black with the power over the white people. Yeah. Which 1973 kind of could be seen, not quite controversial, but certainly would have been seen as a bit progressive. But the chief says, you got to close the case. Yeah. And there's the whole argument. So that's again, like, we're past the midpoint. We're now bad guys are closing in there. Now they're trying to shut down his case, trying to make things difficult for him. And then he's put on riot control.
Yeah, that's his punishment.
And,
right?
and I had a question there where they said they're going to be backed up by the scoopers.
Yeah.
They mentioned the scoopers a couple of times. I'm going, I got to find out what these scoopers are. What on earth is a scooper?
Yeah, and we then cut to, so these are all bad guys cutting in that. Then we have the mayor, so we saw the mayor on TV earlier. We then have that assassin guy, the guy with the sunglasses and the
Donovan.
hat. They meet in this weird greenhouse thing in the middle of the city.
Well, that's where the last living tree in New York is. Or
Yeah,
something?
right. So it's a bit bizarre, and the assassin says, "Well, this detective won't give up on the case, and it's progressing, so it's not looking great. You know, we've got to move the chessboard, don't we?" And he spoke to the priest, and the mayor's like, "I don't want to hear any more. You just have to do what you have to do." And that's always code for where you've got to kill them all, right?
Yeah.
So it is bad guys closing down. And to me, that leads into a perfect all is lost, because in the next scene, the bodyguard is in that huge queue of people at the church going in and out of confession for the poor, exhausted priest. And he just goes in there with the silencer, bang, bang.
Yeah.
Priest is dead.
Shoots that priest dead.
So there's always all is lost is when someone or something needs to die, the priest is dead.
And then we see the marketplace where it's selling Soylent Red and Soylent Yellow. Clearly, people aren't that keen on the Soylent Red or the crumbs, the Soylent crumbs. Or the
They want the Soylent Green. Soylent Green.
And Soylent Green is open, and then the little report comes as, we've been having some shipment problems, as supply line problems. We're out.
Yeah. There's a great hustle and bustle of this, crowd, and it's a full-fledged crowd, isn't it, for a movie? They're not too happy too quick. The scoops need to come in.
It's the scoops, because we go straight to riot, and the Gilbert, the guy with the hook who did the murdering,
he's in the crowd.
He starts trying to shoot Thorn, but every time he shoots, some poor person gets in the way and takes the bullet.
Yeah, I wrote down he tries to shoot him 3 times, so he misses 3 times.
Yes,
and then Thorn manages to, he sort of takes off his police gear a bit, and then so he looks like he's in the crowd, and he manages to corner him near the scooper.
Yeah.
And these scoops, just to build the tension, are scoop dump trucks. They're
trucks.
huge.
They're literally scooping people up with a big front loader.
They've got this great big
hauling them over the top and
dumping in the back. Yeah.
And I was just wondering, are they going to the Soylent Green factory?
They are. They're going somewhere. Sorry, I know. Be very easy to break bones if that was how they did it.
It would have been, yeah. I mean, particularly if you're either the first or maybe the second. You're the first one and you're going straight into the bare metal. But if you're the second one, that third dump is a whole bunch of people have been chopped on top of you. You're going to get squished.
Last week you talked about the police using sonic torture, basically, sonic missiles kind of thing to quell protesting. I mean, this is a whole nother level, isn't it?
They didn't even bother trying to break them. They just start literally scooping them into trucks to haul them all.
Take a few away. We need more bodies anyway.
Yeah.
So it's all going downhill here, really. And then he confronts Gilbert, and before he can say anything, he's squished by the scoop.
Yes.
And so that this is all going downhill for Thorn, because if he could have arrested Gilbert, he's got the murderer and possibly information. But by him being squished, he gets nothing out of it.
And the tensions increase, or the stakes are raised, because now there's someone actively trying to kill him.
That's right.
And he's copped a little injury to his leg.
Yes.
Which when he goes back to Sol, he explains that Sol says, "I'll just take a day off." He says, "Well, if I take 2 days off, I'll lose my job."
Yeah.
And so I'll be all right. It's just. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty grim reality there. So he sends Sol off to the library.
The book
exchange. Talk to the exchanges.
Yeah.
Whilst Thorn and Shirl have their bit of time together.
Yeah.
And that's where it's indicated that Shirl actually likes him and he still likes her a bit more, but it's just not going to happen because, let's face it, she's in the apartment. He's got nothing to offer.
Yeah, and that's where it's a nice, depressing couple conversation where she's like, "Why don't we just run our way to the countries?" He's like, "Oh, every city's the same." And she goes, "Well, why don't we leave America," kind of thing. And he goes, "They protect all the good stuff. All the good land is protected.
The farms are fortresses."
Yeah, we're not getting in anywhere, and so it really sets up. And Sol early in the film had said a similar thing. "I should have gone back home out west years ago, before it became the way it did. And it's like they're all locked in this prison. What you said, a sausage factory. We're all just locked in Soylent Green, where that's it. Therethere's no way out. And
you think you gotta. It's kind of a bit like that in some places. If you're looking at, say, Los Angeles, it's a big, megatropolis down the whole west coast there.
We have one here as well. Sorry.
We're getting towards there.
Yeah.
But, you sort of think, well, there's nowhere on the west coast there, almost nowhere on that west coast you can sort of go without still being surrounded by people everywhere. Yeah. And, of course, it gets expensive to go anywhere where there's more space.
Yeah.
Until you go somewhere where there's a lot more space. And then, of course, you don't have the services.
No.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why there is so much space.
So at the end of Act 2, and this I like to look out for this now. I remember when I first realized this happens as a kid, is that death or the death of something or someone. I'd always recognized intuitively, I suppose, I picked up on the midpoint. Often it would be with these sports team movies. We won this such and such. And you go, okay, it's all really good. And I think no, there has to be actually something really bad happen. And then there has to be something like almost a game ender. And in this one here, Sol goes to the exchange with his Soylent books and he learns some terrible truth and he leaves a note then for Thorn, I'm going home. And we don't know what that means. But Sol walks into this, he walks up a deserted path into a building where there's air conditioning and he's, oh, that's nice, yeah. And there's all like old people, all just streaming in constantly. It's almost like an airport.
Yeah.
There's people coming in and it goes up to the check-in and
everyone's
your
greeted
favourite
nicely.
colour, orange, yes, and I'll get the full 20 minutes, yes.
Yeah.
And he's let off into euthanasia, which is fair enough. There's a certain point where you get too old. And
it's kind of a version of a funeral, the way we almost do a funeral now, but it's the dying bit that's the funeral bit for the person surrendering. So he lies on this very clinical white bed. He's stripped down by a man and a woman. They give him a drink. I presume that's the poison or something.
Yeah.
And the room turns orange because that was his favourite colour. And there's the classical music because that was, again, something else he requested. And then these images come up of sort of natural beauty around the world, right? So it's like the last 20 minutes of peace before you just then go off and die.
Become Soylent Green.
Soylent Green, yeah.
And this is why I think Sol was the B story, because this is his end.
Yeah.
Where Thorn then, he's come in, he said he's just been... realised he can't stay with Shirl in the tower because her new owner is turning up that evening, and he seems very businesslike.
Yeah.
I know you can see then that he doesn't seem like he's mean or anything, but you get you're suddenly brought to the realisation that her life, it's in a nice tower, but it's kind of a terrible life of servitude.
Yeah. Yep.
And Thorn, he also loses his witnesses. He's running all down. And then finally, Sol has learned something. And he runs there and he watches Sol die.
Yeah.
And he uses his police powers to sort of overpower the dude. And they have a touching moment. And this is the part where he learns the inspiration from Sol dies.
Yep.
But Thorn sees the beautiful images and the music.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, geez, like the world is a beautiful place. And we're not really good for it.
No. Yeah, so he has a real moment of clarity for him. He then, as Sol is dying, Sol reveals the secret. And I loved how they did this because the soundscape went fuzzy and he's like, fix it. And it's like, put on the headphones. And he puts the headphones on. We can't hear it as an audience.
Yeah. It's a bit of clickbaity, really, isn't it?
And his reaction is a bit stunned. And then we hear Sol sort of saying, you need the truth, follow the truth, like, prove the truth kind of thing. And I think what Sol was doing all along was he was sacrificing himself, wasn't he? Yeah. He was like the guinea pig. Like if he died, he knew Thorn would come and kind of follow him down the path and find out if they really do turn bodies into Soylent Green. And again, we as an audience are still questioning that if we don't get that. So this really is that final finale, isn't it now?
He does his whole detective thing and says, okay, I've got to go in and
follow this
and do this.
Yeah.
And we get this it's a great sequence of
there's no dialogue. There's lots of raising the stakes, as in he could get caught. You notice that from the lovely funeral home scenario, it becomes much more clinical.
All the bodies just get chucked in the garbage.
So it becomes very clinical and not very pleasant. And then all these bodies are chucked in the garbage truck. Thorn jumps on one, he clambers up one, and then it gets to this really great security barrier that's really over. It looks like there's too much security, doesn't it? And even the way the driver gets out of this security checkpoint and then just walks all the way down to the empty garbage truck, and he's going to drive that back to the
it's like an airlock arrangement.
Yeah, so they won't even let the driver
people who
in.
Collect the trash aren't the ones who see where it gets delivered to.
No.
And the people who do see it getting delivered, they don't look happy.
No.
And they're the ones who are under guard.
Yes.
So because they've got armed soldiers there, guards there.
Yeah.
But they're not really intimidating or pushing the ski mask wearing trash men.
No.
They're really guarding like they're wearing ice cream or milk delivery driver outfits, Like, I don't know why they give them a uniform, just let them wear whatever. Jesus.
So we have this whole little sequence where Thorn follows the body, and it's a really clever way. It's in this massive factory, moving parts, conveyor belts, all that stuff. He surveys the bodies coming down a long conveyor belt one by one. That sort of seems to go deeper into the bowels of the factory. He then follows them, runs across the tower. He sees that they drop into this huge water vat thing. He kind of then follows the pipelines, and he acted this really well because there is no dialogue, there is no action. It's just him trying to find what the answer is. And then he comes across, there's a little bit of suspense of the factory, running around the factory, and he comes across suddenly the Soylent Green biscuits. Like truckloads of them coming down a conveyor belt, and it's like, oh, okay. And so you can see he's putting two and two together. And just when that happens, then these two workers suddenly discover him and they attack. First one, he kind of quickly kicks off the ladder. It's the good old fall from a height. But another one attacks him from behind a machine, and they kind of have a fight. And I love this because he kicked him and he landed on that Soylent Green biscuit conveyor belt, and he's like, he's unconscious, he's wheeling off this other character.
And I think that's kind of that, the director saying, do you get it yet?
Do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it?
Like that dude is on there, like it's a Soylent Green. Yeah.
It's the same thing, right? Yeah. And so then the sirens start ringing and he escapes back onto a garbage truck, and he's off. He uses the emergency phone back in the city to ring Shirl, and this is like, again, rounding up the storylines that he says to her, look, you stay with the new owner. That's good. The owner wants to keep you. I've got nothing for you.
Yeah.
And he's also transferred over to the station, the captain, and he basically just realizes that he's surrounded by these guards closing in on him. So he asks the captain for help, and then there's just a good old-fashioned really gun shootout, isn't there, between these four guys. One of the guys, the last one left, is actually the bodyguard from earlier. And they end up into the crowded church.
Well, I love actually he takes a bullet and loses his gun in the graveyard.
Yeah.
Amongst the tombstones.
Bit of foreshadowing.
Which is this kind of, it's bringing you back home the death involved here.
Yeah. And I mean, positions the main character as wounded and no weapon, whereas the bad guy has a weapon and is not wounded. Goes into the church. We know it's crowded in there. Lots of people, maybe other dead people, whatever. Thorn is bleeding, so he follows the blood trail, but can't quite find him. And with that, someone hops up, and it's just a woman, and he shoots her dead. And so then Thorn takes the chance to tackle and fight. And there's a nice fight scene where they kind of collapse onto other people's beds, and people are screaming and all that sort of stuff.
Knocking the bunks over.
That's right. And Thorn ends up getting punched over and collapses, and there's a weapon on the floor, a knife. And so he kind of puts it underneath him. And as the bodyguard pulls him over to shoot him, he just sort of slashes his guts or whatever. And then hides, and the bodyguard shoots a couple and collapses and is dead. With that, the good old cavalry arrive, the captain and some police, and Thorn is bleeding badly. And this is where we get this great line, Surrey.
Great. Well, yeah, he says, I actually wrote down, because first of all, he said, the plankton is dying, don't you see? Soylent Green is made of people.
Yeah.
The next thing you know, they're going to be farming us for meat.
They're going to be breeding us for meat, I think.
Yes. And then the very last line, Soylent Green is people. And then closing credits.
And just before that, he raises his bloodied hand. And
Yes.
you notice that the black comes in and it's posed like a photo. So you know how you say the book ends? The start, we had that montage of photos. This is like a classic photo. Now, this man's bloodied hand, that could be the turning point where everyone does reveal Soylent Green is made out of people and maybe society changes. But the film doesn't go down that path. It ends on that note. Yeah, maybe it's going to get worse for society.
And the credits roll over top of
Soylent Brown. You know where that comes from.
That's the brown note. They lead all of the people into the funeral home and they play the brown note.
That's right, yeah. Because the wealthy people need the human meat, whereas the unwealthy, they can just eat shit. Come on, there we go. Anyway, and that's the end. A great movie, great plot lines, really quick. I think it's about 100 minutes, maybe 90, 95 minutes, the film, sorry. So it's a really bang, spank for me right on those plot points. I think it really does tick all of those key plot points that you and I like to talk about. So go check it. Let us know if we missed anything really important. Let us know how the film made you feel as well.
Please do.
Now, being a classic, where do we put this in our sort of classic ladder? Have you got a position?
I do.
Where would you recommend someone watch this? What should they watch around it?
I really liked having this with The Fifth Element, because The Fifth Element, likewise, massive overcrowding. It's tough, but it's not as tough. It's just it's been dealt with, the overcrowding, the overpopulation.
Yeah.
Like, it's still kind of a bit desperate, and, Bruce Willis's character is there and not great conditions, but it's still a thriving, noisy, busy, if somewhat crowded place.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that is Predator.
Ooh, okay.
It just because, it's so different.
Yeah, and I've actually got a bit of a similar thing, because I think I've got Fifth Element, Soylent Green, and Event Horizon. So it's probably a little bit similar to your three. Definitely, obviously, following Fifth Element, but going in then, if you watched Event Horizon as your next one, I liked the idea when I put it here in between those two films as well, as like more thinking of Fifth Element, futuristic, technological, alien sort of society. And then you watch this where it's like the real downtrodden dystopian. And then watching something like Event Horizon is much more, again, sort of futuristic space and that horror kind of element. In a way, Soylent Green's got some horror to it because we're eating humans, but then Event Horizon is that real sort of horror, Yeah. So I kind of liked doing that. All three have maybe a bit of a religious philosophy tone in them. And to different degrees,
there's a bit of self-sacrifice.
So, maybe you'd sort of pick up on a little bit like that. But I think also I was kind of leaning more into how the societies are presented in each one. But let us know what you think about that recommendation, again, where you should maybe watch it. And if you're following along at home, let us know about your ladder. Okay, time for some science. I'm hopeful that Surrey is going to finally talk about food.
It is some food science.
Great.
It's not necessarily as yummy as you might like it to be.
What? Tell me about Soylent Green. Tell me how to make it. Where do I get the meat from? I still don't know where it comes from. Sorry. Where does it come from? The director just didn't make it obvious enough.
So Soylent is something you can genuinely buy.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Finally.
Yes. Not the green variety. It's been described as Soylent Grey, I suppose. So in 2013, this software engineer, so he's got to be good. He's called Rob Reinhardt. He started a bit of a blog where he was sick of, first of all, the high price he's paying for food, considering he's not particularly interested in food.
Right.
and he finds he spends a lot of time preparing it and shopping for it, and he doesn't not necessarily knowing what is good to eat, and so on. So he went, well, okay, I'm a software engineer. Let's just break this down to an engineering problem. So he went and did some research on various US government nutrition sites. He did a few other books about nutrition, and he went, I can just come up with the basic building blocks that humans need to survive.
Yeah.
And make a drink type of thing out, like a shake. But it was kind of a thick. It's described as having the consistency of like pancake batter, and just consume, X number of calories of that each day, and then he could tailor the number of calories he needed to consume, and thus the amount of fat and protein and carbohydrate. It's just like a meal shake, but nothing so fancy and expensive. And he says it's quite good in that it brought his monthly food bill from $470 down to $155, and it also saved him a whole lot of time because he didn't have to go shopping.
Yep.
He didn't have to prepare any of these foods. He could just keep doing his software engineering.
I would presume he is single, this man, at this point in time.
Yeah, and yes,
and no children.
I think he would be staying single with that particular variety of food. But yes, so he went, and he experimented a bit because he didn't get the exact ratios right. So he sort of mucked about.
Changed the flavour.
He got well, he didn't really do much with flavour, as it turns out. It's a very recent invention of Soylent, because his idea was just to keep it pure. It had just a bit of flavouring in it, and not fancy flavour. It was I can
say olive oil.
It was
a little bit of flavour.
Soy, lecithin, and something or other, just to give it a palatable taste. His idea was just to have something that was just nutrition that you put in your body, and it would keep you going, and it was cheap, easy to do, and he said it was great because he didn't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore.
Fantastic.
And so he experimented with the formulation of it until he got it at the right consistency of what he wanted. And he did a crowdfunding, and got $1.5 million of sales. So apparently there's quite a few other people out there who are like, yeah, I can't be bothered with cooking. And I can remember as a single software engineer on my own, there were certainly plenty of times where just doing the whole cooking thing and all that shit was just kind of, why bother? And I would eat these protein bars. I'd come home from the gym and I'd have some big mug of water and then a couple of these sort of protein vitamin bars, because I couldn't be asked doing anything else, and they kind of had basically what I needed in them. I'm sure they must have. They looked okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now it's such a pain in the butt. There's times I only do it because of children. I mean, it's like, geez, do we have to eat again?
Well, geez, the number of times when my kids go out to Nana's house, and just my wife and I on a Saturday night, there's a lot of times we have grand ideas of cooking something nice, and then we end up, we just have stuff out of the fridge. Like some corn chips, a wedge of brie, an apple, and a slice of toast.
Just and you keep sharing whatever's left.
There we go. That's fine. Can't be bothered on this. Or we'll go out to dinner, which is, I suppose we'd say it's date night, but really it's just because we can't be bothered cooking. Anyway, so he did this whole Soylent product, and he went, this has actually got legs. And you get a whole bunch of funding, millions and millions of dollars of funding to create this meal replacement supplement, food supplement, whatever you're going to call it. Which the idea was you get a subscription of it, and every couple of weeks you just get out 3 meals a day. You can specify the formulation you want and the number of calories that you're going to have, and that's just what you have. And he called it Soylent. He says he named it after the Harry Harrison novel called Make Room, Make Room. But of course, he also admitted that he chose the name because everyone knows about Soylent Green, and it was easy marketing. People would talk about this Soylent stuff.
Connects.
Yeah. And I mean, that went on. There's problems here and there that people raised about it, saying there was because it's a meal replacement, it has to, it's a different thing. If he called it a a flavoring sachet or a condiment. Nowhere near as strict. But of course, if you're going to call it a meal replacement, it has to fit. There's a whole bunch of different rules for it. So it had trouble with Canada and everything, and it got taken off the shelves in Canada for a while because it wasn't properly labelled. But since 2020, it's back there. Likewise, in America, there's some problem with lead and cadmium quantities in there, which of course...
lead.
Which is to say that it's only the normal amount you'd expect to find in the oats and soy and other ingredients. It's not an exaggerated amount of this sort of stuff. It's just what you normally get out of crops. It's just that because he's ground it all up and stuck it into one meal replacement, there's like a rule that says when it's above this level, you have to mention it. So anyway, there you go. So that was Soylent as brought along.
But I remember that kind of being, I don't know, on the website headlines. I seem to remember, people talk, maybe it was like one of those, news headlines, that, the fluffy piece they put at the end of the news. So I feel like I sort of remember them talking about Soylent, So
I've got one of the formulations here. You go on to, it used to be called DIY Soylent or Soylent DIY or something, but it's changed now. To give you a bit of an idea of what this Soylent was made of. So it's 216 grams. So this is the amount for one day. So one day was 216 grams of oat flour, 2.7 grams of salt, one daily multivitamin pill, 5.1 grams potassium chloride. There's sucralose, which is, artificial sweetener, canola oil, some sugar, some vanilla, choline bitartrate, xanthan gum, whey protein concentrate, calcium and vitamin D, and vitamin K. So it's, as you'd expect, it's just gross. I can't imagine what that tastes like, considering it's like a bit of vanilla, some sugar and some artificial sweetener. I suppose it'd be vanilla-y.
Well, it kind of is. You were saying those protein bars. I mean, because I'm putting all those ingredients in my head. I guess it's kind of like a porridge. Cereal.
I mean,
dry, like a muesli bar. Like, no, not a muesli bar, like an oat bar.
Yeah, it's oat flour and
if
salt
you squish,
and stuff.
I mean, do you cook it? Do you put it together? What do you do?
Yeah, you make a shake of it. You mix it with water and drink it.
Okay.
They also do sell it in bar form, which is basically that, but compressed.
Compressed, that's what I imagine.
Which, of course, leads to the obvious question
I think you'd need a lot of water if you ate to that.
Yeah, there were complaints of digestive distress.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, though, as it was pointed out, is that if you're the sort of person who is not that interested in food, not that good on cooking, you're probably eating a very low fiber diet because you're probably eating packaged, ultra-processed food.
Yeah.
And as he points out, old Rob Reinhardt here, he points out there's actually quite good health benefits for these people going on to Soylent because it's got all the vitamins and minerals. It's actually not very processed. Like it's oat flour and it's just ground up stuff pushed together. I mean, it's not. I'm not going to say that I think it's an appropriate food.
Spacebrains does not approve the Soylent product,
but the people who this would be marketed to are then going from an ultra processed low fiber, then they're suddenly hitting this, getting the 25 grams a day of fiber they're expected to get. It's going to mess their guts up a bit because suddenly their guts are going to have like bacteria going that previously hadn't been fed very much, suddenly getting all their fiber. And they're going to get gas, they're going to get discomfort. But as a lot of people said that once they got through the first week or so, they adjusted. And they were actually okay for it. So I went on and found Britannica.com under the science human nutrition. They've got some recommended daily intake. I'm struggling to find exactly who recommends it, but this was an article written by United States and Australian scientists, and it's from the National Academy of Sciences. So it's kind of, let's just say, there is a group of scientists who recommend this as daily intake, and that's looking at macronutrients, so that's carbohydrate, fat, and protein. Some people chuck water in as well, but I don't know if that's a nutrient so much. And then you got vitamins and minerals. And there's some of these that we need to intake through our diet. And so it's, it's 130 grams of protein, 38 grams of fiber, 17 grams of omega-6, 1.6 of omega-3, and 56 grams of protein. So that's the main thing. And comparing it to Brett, he's got 216 grams of oat flour. So that's got to be, about your 130 grams of carbohydrate, and then 38 grams of fiber, and then there's some fat and protein in oat flour as well. So it's getting there. This is sugar, 47 grams. That's going to be carbohydrate, and he's got a third of a cup of canola oil. So that's where this sort of comes from. The other question, though, because I'm going through all this and I'm thinking to myself, and I have actually thought a lot about food because I used to be considerably overweight, and went and did myself a certificate in personal training and worked as a gym instructor and bit for a little while. So nutrition was very much on my mind. It still is. But there's this thing called nutritionism. And what it is this idea, you've got, roughly speaking, two camps of ideas. One is that food is a holistic thing. It's like, a loaf of bread is different to a bowl of rice.
Yeah.
Whereas nutritionism is the idea that you break everything down. You look at the loaf of bread is, 13 grams of protein, 4.5 grams of fiber. And if you were to take separately each of that amount of protein, fiber, carbohydrate, oil, and just put it in a big pile, like the Soylent product, it is the equivalent to eating the finished, the other product. Eating an orange, you could just break down to the water, sugar, fiber, vitamin C, blah, and have those things separately.
Yep.
And it would be equivalent. And I know there's a lot of people, I'm hoping a lot of people sort of say, it doesn't quite work that way.
No.
There's the way things are bonded. And indeed, many nutritionists and nutrition scientists, food scientists would sort of say, while a lot of experimentation is done on individual nutrients, because you've got to try and maintain and modify only one variable in experiments and so forth, there is still considerable knowledge to be gained or yet to be learned about the complex interactions of not just one type of protein with one type of carbohydrate that you might find in pork compared to the protein and carbohydrate you find in wheat.
Yeah.
Not just that, but also then the ratio of protein to carbohydrate. So even if you had the exact same wheat starch and wheat proteins separated out and ate them at the same, overall quantities, the proportion that they occur within natural products is also significant.
Yeah.
And it has an interaction on the way that our gut flora break it down, how our enzymes interact with it to produce the nutrients.
And I think what I've seen before, there is that documentary called That Sugar Film by an Australian filmmaker, which, again, documentary, so not completely scientifically referenced academically, but there's that. And I've also heard good old Dr. Carl talk about this previously. You said the orange, right? And I straight away thought of hearing it in both the film and Dr. Carl separately. Was the thing is, what you miss, you're right, you could take all the ingredients of an orange and lay it out in the sugar and the water and the whatever, right, and eat it. But the thing with when you eat the orange, there's a few other things that actually go on. When you're chewing an orange and how your enzymes in your mouth break that orange down, and the time it takes and the energy that it actually does. The fact that you have to chew an orange for an X amount of time, or an apple or whatever, goes down. And there's a couple of things that happen there, that the transfer then into your gut of the vitamins and that, versus, and they were just talking about in this example, juicing the orange.
Yeah.
If you just take the orange and you just juice the crap out of that one orange, you just drink it, you're actually, then the way your bowel or your stomach digests it is very different. The sugar it extracts, the speed it extracts at, the sugar that rinses over your mouth is extremely different to what hits your belly. And what normally happens then is you don't get the signal, versus if you eat the orange, that you're full now.
Yeah.
That you've eaten a whole big orange, because you've juiced it, you've taken away the textures, and you drink it in 10 seconds. A glass, which is one whole orange, versus eating orange takes you 3 or 4 minutes. And it's a signal to your brain. Therefore, what people will do is they'll go, oh, I'll juice 3 or 4 oranges. And now they're drinking the equivalent of, their daily intake of sugar.
Yes.
And so I think that's a big component there, isn't it? Like you could break down the vitamins and the nutrients into tablets, but then you're not actually chewing them, and there's a process there, and you're not digesting them in your stomach the same way, and there's a process there.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, but that to me makes sort of a lot of sense.
It does, and it's one of the problems that people had with Soylent. There are obviously people who very much enjoy it. As I said, there are people who are genuinely apathetic towards food. Like, they just need something that will stop them from feeling hungry and they let them know they've had the nutrients they require.
Yeah, fair enough.
But the problem is that it doesn't give you that satisfaction because you drink it. And I've had meal replacement shakes before, and it'll say 400 calories, and you drink it. And you go, well, I could probably drink 3 or 4 of those. So that's not a problem.
Yeah.
But if someone gave me a 400-calorie, salad sandwich, I would struggle to eat 3 or 4 of those.
Yeah.
But the effect that nutritionism has is it's kind of a misrepresentation of the science, or is it a misguidance or a misapplication, if you will? Because if we can think that this doesn't sound right, you can bet that the people who've spent their life studying food, they already know this.
They're shaking their heads.
Yes. So nutritionism, however, it leads into marketing and easy messages, because it's very hard to tell people it's very easy, but nobody ever freaking listens. We all know what we have to do to eat well.
Yeah.
We need to eat mostly fruits and vegetables, some protein source, which doesn't have to be from animals, but we're going to need some sort of protein source, and we're going to need some sort of fiber and what else will I? We're going to need some carbohydrates. Some proportion of those. You can usually probably leave it up if you're eating relatively unprocessed foods. And I know you always get someone who goes, oh, well, actually, the process of chewing a food is processing the food. Like, we all know what we're talking about when we're talking about processing foods, right? You're not grinding it down, dismembering it, reintroducing additional salts and other texture modifiers and so forth. But we all know that that's what we should do. We shouldn't be drinking soft drinks and lots of alcohol, and we shouldn't be doing all of these things. We all know that. But it's really hard to sell that to people.
Of course.
Because you could ask the least healthy, most prone to dying of nutrition-related problems, all of this stuff, and they say, yes, I already know all that. And, of course, you'd look at them sitting there as they're getting their second kidney transplant and all that, and they go, what? You're like, okay. But you know what nutritionism is really easy to do is to say, this one thing is this crazy one thing is the secret to why you're dying. And one of the problems that we have in our nutrition education at the moment is that back in the 50s, there's a fellow called Ansel Keys who was given a whole lot of money to come up with some studies on diets. In particular, people were worried about coronary heart disease, so stroke and heart attacks.
Yeah.
So he spent a whole bunch of time and money looking at 22 nations, 22 countries and different peoples and their diets and how they perform. He chose 7 of them. So it's called the 7-nation, it's a 7-country study.
Yeah.
And when you map out the relationship, standardized relationship between saturated fat intake and cardiovascular disease, there was a dose relational proportion, proportional relationship. Yep. So the more cholesterol, the more saturated fat you ate, the more likely you were to die of cardiovascular disease. And thus came about through, particularly then out of the 70s and the 80s, the low-fat diet fad, where everything was going from butter to margarine. It was all lean. You could still go and buy low-fat skim milk.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're worried about the amount of fat you're getting in the milk you're consuming too much milk. That's just like it's a normal whole milk is 4% fat.
Yeah.
How many liters per day are you drinking of milk? That's too much.
Yeah. But it's marketed.
Like unless you're a baby cow, you shouldn't be drinking like 12 liters of milk a day.
No.
If you have like a glass of milk like on your cereal or a bit of milk in your coffee, the 4% or 0.1%, it makes zero difference. Not compared to the whatever garbagey thing you're putting in your mouth later on in the day.
Which we are now proudly sponsored by beef milk.
Yeah, the beef milk. But anyway, so Ansel Keys, he had this study, and it really brought this nutritionism to the front, where it's like saturated fat is the bad thing.
Yeah,
and I'm sure the heart was in the right place. We were trying to help people here. He ignored the fact that France ate more saturated fat but died of less heart disease. We won't worry about that. We won't worry about the fact that, Japan actually, it's not so much they don't eat a lot of saturated fat, they actually eat a lot of fish, for example, and very little sugar. So nutritionism would bring about this demonization of individual things, and we're still doing it today.
Yeah.
And Soylent Green, Soylent Yellow, Soylent Red were each, Soylent Green was high protein, and it was just derived from something else. It's the Soylent Red was the Soylent Yellow for fast-acting energy. Yeah. So presumably that was just like real sugar starch.
Yeah.
And then Soylent Red didn't seem to be very popular.
No.
So it's probably just a lump of fat or something. Or maybe it just wasn't maybe it was just fiber.
Yeah.
But yeah,
probably was starch.
That's where I was looking at this is going, from the 70s, this was a really strong trend. It's come back around now and people are going, you know what? We really probably should have more balanced diets.
Yeah.
But certainly through the 70s, there was that trend to, saturated fat out. And every company jumped on board and said, let's pull saturated fat out of everything.
Yeah.
I found 35% less fat butter. Butter is fat.
I know.
What the hell? Also, just eat less butter.
Yeah.
Like, if you're worried about the fat, just eat less of it. You don't have to eat that much butter, for goodness sake.
There was that horror, and you and I grew up in the 80s, and it was that war on fat. And you think about that side effect of that, which is such a shame, because when my wife and I did it all for our eldest, we looked into all the different foods, and fats can be a really good thing for a brain. That's the thing. Like, fat is good for your brain.
Your brain is made out of fat.
You're exactly right. You shouldn't drink 12 liters of milk. Yeah, 4% fat. That's a lot. That's a lot of fat. But if you're drinking a glass of milk, 4% fat's nothing. And in fact, it's far better than what they substitute into then some of the skim milk. So in terms of some of the processing, so it's like, you're better just to go the full cream, full fat. Enjoy it. Enjoy the fat.
Just
if you're having one glass of it, just enjoy it.
Exactly. Don't eat the whole cake. You don't need it.
No, that's right.
Don't eat all the Soylent Green.
No, just a little.
Save some for your friends.
Yeah.
Or save some of your friends. Anyway, so there we go. That's a bit of food science. A bit of Soylent. I thought that Soylent was interesting.
Tasty.
I'm getting hungry now. I got a lasagna out there.
We've got to try some Soylent Green at some point. Soylent Green spacebrain cookies. Something like that.
Okay. Maybe we'll see if we can organise that for the this film festival. Maybe the after party or something.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the classic Soylent Green. Go check it out. Let us know what you thought about it. Hit us up on the socials and let you know what we discussed in this latest episode. Please think about reviewing us where you listen to podcasts, wherever that might be, Apple, Spotify, etc. Check out the Spacebrains website. We also have the Spacebrains Film Festival website. Check that out. We are available on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. So communicate to us. We've been getting some interesting responses lately, especially to Battle Beyond the Stars, or some people reached out about their love of that film and watching it as kids in the cinema in 80s and coming back to it. And there was one guy out there that mentioned he imported Blu-ray DVDs 15 years ago or something from the US, and that was one of them that he imported because he couldn't get it here in Australia. Let us know what you think about Soylent Green.
Do you think it really is, people?
Is it? What?
Is it?
But he lands, the guard lands on the conveyor belt. He hasn't been cooked. How can it? Next episode is I Am Legend.
Absolute.
I'm not going to give any spoilers, but this film takes you on an adventure, tearjerker, and at the same time terrifying.
It's pretty good. I'm going to show my kids this one.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, we'll get onto it and we'll discuss it on the next episode of Spacebrains.
See ya.
Bye.